recovered alcoholic. And I don't know whose idea it was for me to follow him. I think next time I'm going to go first so I don't have to follow him. That was well done. I appreciate it, Matt. Thank you. I say I'm a recovered alcoholic because the first part of the big book, there in the front and the cover, is the first unlisted promise. It says the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered. And then in the beginning of the preface, it alludes to that same thing. And I was always brainwashed or taught, brainwashed in treatment that I'll always be in recovery. Well, to recover means to get back something we've lost. Alcoholism is a loss of my choice. I got back my choice in drinking. I can choose to drink or not choose to drink today. So I've recovered from that. I no longer suffer from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. I no longer engage in pitiful and incomprehensible acts of demoralization. So I'm a recovered alcoholic, but I know that my recovery is contingent on maintaining a fit spiritual condition through this 12 spiritual principles. One thing I really like about this program, one thing I like to say about this program is that, you hear a lot of the time that it's not for people who need it, it's for people who want it or need it. I don't think it's for either. I don't think it's a program for people who need it or want it. It's a program for people who do it. And that's where the rubber meets the highway. A lot of us need it, don't do it. A lot of us want it, don't do it. Some of us need, all different combinations of those things. But if we do this program, we get recovery. It actually works. And like Matt said, 1 year, give it a chance. It's what I've made that same suggestion to many, many people. To be honest with you, I don't have a whole lot to say tonight. I usually have something in mind and I've really drawn a blank. So I'm going to spend probably the next half hour or so proving that. And I want to share something. One of my original old timers, when I first got sober at about 2 years, 1 to 2 years, I figured out that it was a good idea to hang around old timers. And I found old timer groups. I originally went to the Alano Club, the Eastside Alano Club at noon, which had a bunch of old timers in it. And then I found the Midway group of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that was my home group for about 20 years. And when I joined that group, Alice came in, was in a nice, sweet way. She told me, Rocky, in this meeting, you're a baby until you're in your 20s. And that's the kind of time, the kind of people. They were all golden oldies, people in their 50s. And a pair of them was Luther and Bernice Johnson, who picked me up and put me in their back pocket for whatever reason when I was about 3 years old. And I spent 20 close years with them. And at one point, I got asked to go up and they were starting a new, they call them roundups in Canada. It was a new convention. And they asked me to come up and be their first speaker. I accepted, and I didn't tell anybody about that. And the Wednesday before I was going up, my girlfriend, I was sitting at the table with Luther and Bernice at our home group, and she goes, Rocky's going to be a speaker this weekend. And they just looked at me, and Luther was proud, and Bernice was looking at me with her laser beam eyes. And after the meeting, she got up, walked around the table, picked me up on my arm, started walking me to the front door. And her hearing is about as bad or good as mine. And I looked at her and I said, Bernice, am I in trouble? And she goes, oh, heavens, no, it's no trouble at all. And I'm like, well, that's better than yes. So she got me out to the sidewalk, walked me across the sidewalk, through the meeting, after the meeting, out into the parking lot. I mean, deep into the parking lot. And then she stopped all of a sudden and turned around and looked at me. And she said, Rocky, I'm going to tell you what my old timers told me the first time I spoke. I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, you pray before you speak. I said, yes, ma'am. And she goes, and don't give a speech. She said, all alcoholics are egomaniacs. You know that, don't you? Yes, ma'am. And then I said, but I'm scared. And she goes, good. And she threw her hands up and she goes, you go up there, you pray, you share from the heart, and you be scared. And I want you to know that to this day, I'm still following directions. I prayed, I'm going to share from the heart, and I'm still scared. And I'm not afraid of disappointing or not impressing any of you. Not afraid of disappointing or not impressing myself. I just want to please God, who did this for me. That's who I want to impress. That's what I'm here for. I grew up in a home that had alcohol wide open, yada, yada. I had a severe, pretty big traumatic childhood. Got through that trauma at 9, and I had my first, oddly enough, my first real recollection of an alcoholic drunk was at 9 years old. And that's the first time that I drank to get obliterated and couldn't stop. And I had a bottle of wine. My cousin had a bottle of wine. I drank mine. He drank about half of his and was on his hands and knees, projectile vomiting purple puke. And I picked up his half a bottle and drank it. That was my first real solid alcoholic drinking. And it progressed from there. I was a redneck country boy that hated drugs and had absolute, we'll just say, disdain for people who did them. But eventually, what did alcohol do? It took me to one of my yets. I started smoking pot. And then it took me to a number of other substances, all the way up to cocaine. And looking back, I hate alcohol because it is so cunning, baffling, and powerful and insidious. I drank every single day. I drank like breathing. I'm a free diver. I can hold my breath for well over 3 minutes, but sooner or later I got to breathe again. And it's the same thing with my drinking. I might have went like a day or two here or there, or maybe 11 days one time without drinking, but sooner or later I always had to drink again. But the insidious part of it was I never thought I was an alcoholic. And I would argue with you that I wasn't, because I had developed my own definition of alcoholism or alcoholic. And I didn't drink in the morning, I didn't drink at work, and I didn't live under a bridge. So I'm not an alcoholic. And I took that almost to my grave. But at the end of my using career, an outside substance, well, I'll say it, I'm an alcoholic first and foremost, but I had other issues. And one of them was cocaine. Cocaine brought me to my knees, beat me to a pulp, and it took me into treatment. So from that respect, I love cocaine. It did for me what I could not do for myself. It beat me into submission. I was going into treatment, and I was talking to my girlfriend, and I'm going at it with one substance in one hand and my alcohol in my other, and driving up the road to the treatment center. She's driving me, and I had no idea what I was going into. I'd had a spiritual awakening. God spoke to me. I responded, went to treatment. We're driving up the freeway. I'm looking at her, and I said, what if they want me to quit drinking? And she was a nurse, and her eyes just got like that big, and she just mashed the gas and started hauling ass. And I'm sure she was thinking, I got to get him there because he's thinking. And when I got to treatment, I told them, and I was in a really ugly mood. I was yelling and screaming and cussing and swearing in people's face a lot. And I was telling them I want to learn how not to do cocaine. I didn't want to quit. I just wanted to learn how not to do it when I didn't want to, literally. I said, my pot, I'll take it or leave it, but don't F with my beers. I am not an alcoholic. I'm screaming that at these people. So a 1 to 3 day blackout for everybody. They put me in for 5. They locked me in a room for 5 days. Got out, went to my first color group. Just about got in a fight with a couple guys in there. They kicked me out of that group. Tried another one the next day. I decided to tone it down a little bit and managed to get through all of that. And had another spiritual awakening. And this one was that I had this thought one night that if I'm not an alcoholic, why am I so defensive about my beers? And then I thought, and every time I've ever been in trouble, alcohol was involved. Every car wreck, motorcycle wreck, truck wreck, every time I've been in the back of a cop car, every time I've been in jail, every fight I'd ever been in, and there were a lot of fights. I used to fight a lot, except one in 5th grade where I was in school on the playground at recess. Every fight I'd ever been in had alcohol involved. And I thought about that, and I was like, maybe I'll just try this thing. So I just dipped my foot in the pool for like the next period of time, and I did what I was told to do. I got a sponsor, started talking to him, and I had actually known him from like 25 years before. We were competing drug addicts for the same people, or drug dealers for the same people. And so here he is, 5 years sober, and I thought, well, if he can do it, I can do it. I had no faith in this program or these 12 steps or anybody else whatsoever. And how could I? Because I had no experience with any of it. So, but when I talked to him, and I called him Uncle Ken, and everybody picked up on that. His name was Ken B, and he was the most He was quiet, soft-spoken, kind, gentle, patient, wise, um, in-service person that I could even imagine. He was a perfect sponsor for me, and I wanted what he had. Um, so I just started doing what he said because I had some faith in him, and I did some things and got some results, and it got me some more faith in him, and I got more results and more faith in him, got results, and pretty soon, because faith is a direct result of getting results, I had faith in this program because of what he had done. So I started doing this, went off of doing his thing to doing the program, and then I started getting results and more faith and more results, and it snowballed until I thought this thing actually works. So I'm going to talk. And about 110 days, I was at a meeting, and it turned out to be a birthday meeting. And I remember just sitting there thinking about it, and I go, wow, I think I could go get one of these coin things, not 100 and something days, I could get a 90-day one. And I was walking up to get it, and it's overwhelming. I had this like picture in my head of Pigpen from the Peanuts with the black sooty cloud around him, but with my face, right? And the soot represented like chaos, and it was just settling. That big cloud was just settling around me. And as I walked up there, I just decided then and there, I said, I'm going to do this. And that's when I committed. So it really took 3 separate spiritual experiences for me to actually, and that was over a period of about 100 days for me to actually get into this program and start working it. And life has not been the same since. Um, so I started out, of course, in treatment, looking at the steps and going, okay, yeah, I did that. Yeah, I've done that. Okay, I'm doing that one right now. It's over. That one, this one, I haven't done a 4-step, but 5, yeah, 6, well, sure, yep. And I went through it and, I call that wall AA. I did wall AA while I was in treatment. Came out, I just needed to do a 4-step, I'm good to go. Well, my sponsor didn't quite see it that way, so we decided to do it sequentially and start at the beginning and work through it. But the weird thing was, for whatever reason, and I can't recall, but we did my first 4-step with a Hazelden guide. And I did that, and I went ahead and finished the whole thing, and I had a huge experience. It was amazing. It was big. Um, it was, for me, it was like coming out of the bathroom that I'd locked myself in for so many years to like standing in the kingdom where the walls are way out there and the roof is way up there. This is vast space. It was just a huge experience. But when I closed that book, it was over. That experience was done. And within about a year, I wanted more. So I started working through the book as it's outlined. My grant sponsor was Don Pritt of Aurora, Colorado. He was a keynote speaker in the World Services Convention in 1990 here. And then my big book sponsor was John Lane, a sponsee of his. And so John took me through the book, and it was amazing. One of the first things that happened to me was I lost the obsession to drink. We have a 2-part disease. It's the obsession of the mind and the allergy of the body. The craving, physical cravings kick in once I drink. And I lost that obsession of the mind right away because I had found God about 5 years before I got sober. And I pursued that faith earnestly, vigorously, and I could not stop drinking or using. And it was the darkest, most destitute, most shameful, guilt-ridden 5 years of my life. Knowing God, knowing that he could restore me to sanity, because I had had miracles earlier in my life, miracles of healing, like the trauma that I was healed from when I was 9. And I had been turning my will and my life over to him 24/7, and I would leave church and I would use on the way home. And I could not stop. It got worse. It actually got worse when I found God. And I should back up because the spiritual experience I had was one night I was drinking and using hard, going crazy, and I had a voice speak to me that came from inside of me and outside of me all at the same time. It was just an omnipotent voice, and the voice said, Rocky, if you keep doing what you're doing, you're either going to go to the hospital or you're going to go to jail. If you go to the hospital, you're going to be dead, and if you go to jail, you're going to wish you were dead. And I was startled. I was looking around this room. I'm looking at my girlfriend sleeping there, and I'm like, I didn't come from her. And I looked down the hall, checked the bathroom, and I'm sitting down. And my next thought was, and of all the near-death experiences that I'd been through, I'd always known God had a purpose for me. And so my next thought was like, and if either of those things happen, I won't fulfill God's purpose in me. And then I thought, and in the meantime, I can have all that stuff for her. So I woke her up and I told her to check me into treatment. So that was the first spiritual experience that took me to the second, to the third, to get me committed to this program. Um, so, anyways, I started working. So what I was saying is, I had done my second step I knew that second step. I was practicing that third step, but until I went to treatment and literally did what was the first step, when I stepped over that threshold, that was me admitting powerlessness and unmanageability. And my obsession was lifted. I came down in there. I didn't Jones. They offered me Valiums. I didn't take them. It was like it was gone at that moment that those first three steps were intact. But I didn't know that until I got through the book to We Agnostics, where it talks about the obsession of the mind and the miracle of the healing, and that the elements are simple. And then it paraphrases step one, step two, step three. And I was blown away because I knew I didn't desire it anymore, but hadn't figured out why. But there it was spelled out in that book. So that made me just voracious to get going through that book. And so I came to my fourth step, and my sponsor told me, Rocky, when you start it, finish it. And don't sit in it. And when you finish it, give it, and do not sit in that fourth step. It's not the place to sit. When you start, don't start it till you finish it. You're going to finish it. And when you start it, finish it. So I started, I made a promise to myself to write every single day until it was done. And I kept that promise, maybe 10 minutes a day, maybe 2 hours a day, but it took me 4 months to get it done. I got it done, made my appointment, went and sat with my sponsor at a river, brought food and beverages, and that poor man listened to me read for 5.5 hours. I think I had 70 pages on a legal pad. I fed him, and I gave him beverages, and I fed him. So we got done there, and I had this grand plan. I was so sick of writing. Oh my God, I was just sick of that. And so I had this grand plan that I was going to come back, cruise 6, cruise 7, rest on my laurels, do some half measure stuff for a little while before I start writing my 8th step again. And when I got done with my 5th step, I'm sitting in my car on this river, and he walks over and he goes, so are you willing to pray for your 7th step? And I said, sure. He goes, okay, here, read this. So I read the 7th step. And he held my hand. I'm going, well, that was nice, but can I do my own? And he said, sure. So I prayed my own. I just called on Spirit of God, and I prayed my own. And when that happened, I felt this, after I did it, I felt this hot, tingly whoosh come down slowly over my body. And I was just like, wow, he's here. And we wrapped it up. I drove him down to his car down in Monroe, and he's taking off. And he walks over to my window and he goes, you know what, Rocky? Is when you prayed the 7-step prayer, because I didn't feel anything, because he was holding my hand. And he goes, well, when you did your prayer, I felt this hot, tingling whoosh come down over my body. And I just went, this stuff works. This really works. And the truth is, things changed. Things changed. When I was in situations that I know this would cause me to react like that. That would cause me to react like this. It just changed. I wasn't like that. I wasn't doing those typical things that I used to do, those bad behaviors. And other people saw it in me, and I could see it in myself. Usually we don't see it in ourselves right away, but I could see it. It was amazing. So that made me want to pursue things even more, but I did not want to come home and start writing again. Oh, gosh. Because first thing he told me was, now go home and write your 8th step. Okay, so I got willing to be willing and went down and started writing my 8th step. And while I'm writing it, I started it right away. Got home that day and started writing it and had a pretty good little list going there. And I'm looking at that going, this looks familiar. Couldn't figure it out. And finally, I went over and I grabbed my 4th step and I whipped it open. And my resentment list, everyone on that amends list was on my amends list. Everybody in amends that everybody that I had resentments towards, I owed amends to. It was the same list. Now, there were people I owed amends to that I didn't have resentments towards, but that was a small list. I just threw in a few names and it was done. So that's why I say if you're willing to go to any length, you probably won't have to. And I know my God has a sense of humor. I went home and I was just dreading doing that, but it was done. And I don't usually share that with people because that's like sponsees to figure that out for themselves. But that's the truth of it. They're the same list. Um, so then I started on my amends. And this is something I really toyed with the idea of just sharing about amends tonight because it's just the best. It seems to be this thing that has a stigmatism attached to it in this program that people don't want to go face that or do it or whatever. But that's where we get our freedom. And I loved it. I loved it. One example, I had a guy that I had sold me a car when I was 16, get $100 down, 5 payments of $100 a month. I had a good paying job, but I got the car and never made a payment. And after a while, a couple of months, I heard he was looking for me. So I went and parked the car back in front of his house with the keys in it and left. Never talked to him again. And that always ate my lunch. I felt bad about that. Now, there were worse, believe me, there were worse amends, but this is just one example. It was something that always bothered me thinking about him. And I was in not all my amends, some of my amends, I took them off the list and I went and found the person and did them directly. Others, they go walking across the bowling alley and I instantly go through the 3 O's. I'm like, oh God, oh no. Okay. I get up, walk over and go through the outline and made my amends to him. And he just looks at me and he goes, that's okay, Rocky. I just sold it to someone else. But that ate my lunch for 25 years. That bothered me. Um, Another one was I grew up. I did well. I did well in school and when I wanted to, and I was pretty athletic and did well in a couple of sports. But my father never one time told me that he was proud of me, and I grew up missing that. And I made my amends to him, and it turned out inadvertently to be a written amends that I wrote in a card on Father's Day with no plan or forethought. And I left the card there for him because he wasn't home that day. And I came back a couple of days later and I'm sitting on the couch. My mom's in her recliner using this. And he looks over and he goes, hey, I got your card. I go, okay, cool. And he goes, thank you. I'm proud of you. And I'd never heard those words from my father in my life. And that happened when I was about 2 years sober. And my mother's jaw dropped. Her eyes got like that big. And she just looked slowly at him and then looked slowly at me. And after that, my father told me many times before he passed away that he was proud of me, and we became the best of friends. So I was talking to my sponsor about that. I'm like, I love this stuff. Let's. I need to just come up with some more. I need to make, I need to make more amends. I'm liking this. And he's like, I don't know if it was an omen or a curse, but he said, Rocky, they may not all go this way. And the next one, I was eating breakfast, and one day, and I see the date, and it was my brother's birthday. And it was the 3 O's. Oh God. Oh no. Okay. Got up, went up to make my brother's amends, and that was going to be a brutal one. I knew it. Lot of stuff that I thought I owed him amends for. I did the outline. He just looked at me and shrugged. He said, Rocky, you don't owe me any amends. We're cool. I'm like, really? And he said, yeah, we're cool. But blah, 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 blah. And he just went into all this other stuff that had nothing to do with me and him, whatever. And I knew the book said I'm there to clean my side of the street. And if he's messing his up, I'm still not supposed to address it. That's his side. He did his long thing. And it was about my parents. And I told him, me and mom are cool. We're already handled. And me and dad were friends. And he just kind of scoffed at me, and I go, really, Greg, we're friends. I go, Dad asks me for help. And he just had a jolting body reaction because my father, he had been in business with my father, and my father didn't accept help from anybody that he didn't pay to help him. But in the end, he would call me and ask me for help to do things, and whether it's throw shingles on a roof or to give him a ride to pick up his car. And that just shocked my brother. But I left there feeling, so I heard him out. We finished up, thanked him for his time. I left there feeling kind of like he soiled on me. I just felt dirty. And I got out to my car and I realized that I still felt like after all my other amends, my back got straighter, my head got higher. And even though I felt soiled on, I realized my back feels straighter and my head feels higher. And that's when it occurred to me that our amends are not for the other person. Our amends are for us. Our amends. of course, I want to clean up the wreckage of my past and bring peace to that person. But ultimately, either way, it's for me. It's about me and my freedom. And that ninth step is just, it's so huge. I just love it. And I just want to encourage everybody just to get out there and do it and tackle it head on and be fearless and thorough. And step 10, that's just an ongoing thing. It's an ongoing thing. And asking myself those 4 questions every night. And where did I do these? And trying to make making those amends as soon as possible, or maybe recognizing it before I go to bed at night. Maybe recognizing it like when I was rude to the cashier and I got out to the car and going back in, and, but I still can, and making an amends for being rude or short. And that 10th step, the thing I like about it, I think the most is that it keeps me from building a bigger 8-step list. I can keep that thing manageable and I'm not building it or adding more dirt to it. The 11th step, my sponsor, when he started me in this book, the book, there's a line that says the main object of this book is enable us to find a power greater than ourselves, which will solve our problem. I can't, he can. And my sponsor told me that when we're going through this book, he did not want me to depend on him for anything other than to take his book. He said, if you want to call or you have a problem, fine, call. I'll listen. He goes, but I might not be there. I might not answer the phone. You might ask me a question and I might give you the wrong answer. He goes, don't rely on me. He said his main job was to help me to establish and develop and maintain a spiritual connection or a conscious contact with my higher power, with my God. And he said that's what this book is about. So, I do that. I pray at night. I pray during the day. Every time I drive somewhere, I pray. I pray before I got here. I try to maintain that conscious contact with God. And praying is easy. That's the easy part. Telling God, what I need and what I want, all that stuff. I saw this cartoon earlier in the year that this guy was down on his knees in his bed praying. And the caption, the little balloon thing said, okay, God, so here's the plan. And that's how I used to pray when I got in here. This is where we're going. This is what we need to do. This is what I want. This is what I think. This is what I will. And these days, my prayer in the morning consists of a simple verse that says, good morning, God. And I'll just say it. Good morning, God. This is your day. I'm your child. Show me your way today. But when I pray it, I say, good morning, God. This is your day. I am your child. Show me your way today. And that's how I start my day in the morning. The 12th step, there's so much. That's another thing that the person could just do an entire talk on. But my grand sponsor, I used to fly him out here to do a retreat in Camp Indianola every year. And we're driving back. So I got to drive with him, back across the ferry and airport or wherever I was taking him after. And I got to spend one-on-one time with him. And he was a really, really wise man that traveled every country of this world carrying the message. He was a trustee at large for World Services, and he was responsible for taking the big book to Russia. He got AA into Russia. So I like to listen when he talked. And we were talking about meetings and steps one time, and I was talking about how important it was. And he says, Rocky, the meetings and steps will not keep you sober. And I just was like slapped in the face. I just looked at him like that was sacrilege, And he said, Rocky, you will stay sober through spiritual growth, through work and self-sacrifice for others. And that was a real eye-opener. That's when I really realized what it was all about. And so that's what I've tried to do to maintain my fit spiritual condition. And, there was a need to start a workshop this year. So I started one, and I've got some other things going on. And I try to stay in service. I follow people's example, especially when those people are good examples. Humility was a subject earlier this month, or maybe it was June, that came up several times in meetings. And I was like, what's a practical method? It's a physical thing that I can do to practice humility. Because I was told early on that humility is like being cool. I got to tell somebody I'm cool, I'm not. And I was like, what could I do to practice humility? What kind of physical action could I take? And do some spiritual awakening stuff that I don't have time for. I came to realize that for me, the way I practice humility is by doing service work or doing kind things for others, whether it's money or helping somebody on the side of the road, whatever it is, doing that and not telling anybody. That to me is really what it's about today. That's how I practice humility. And about the seventh step, I know I got to finish up here.
Okay.
One thing that I hear a lot around the meetings at Paul's is that, people saying, yeah, I'm working on my character defects and I'm working on my shortcomings and I'm working on, I always just wonder, like, what, what work, what does a person do to work on their character defects? What's the job description? What's job title, personal, I don't know. Character defect removal technician. I mean, I don't know what is that? What does that mean? Because I don't know, and I'd like to know, just like I wanted to know something practical I could do to practice humility. But I think that I know what worked for me is to let God do it, to actually let God remove my defects of character. If I could, I would have. I wouldn't be here now. I wouldn't need to be here now. So, anyways, yeah, the 12th step. That's how I stay sober. And I also had a realization later in my recovery that practicing these principles in all of our affairs, obviously all, not meaning not just the program, but I started practicing them with my neighbors, with people in the store, people in parking lots, wherever I went. And that's really when my recovery stepped up to another level, because it's easy to come to these halls and act all spiritual or be spiritual. But out there, when we're working with people or around people that aren't necessarily practicing spiritual principles or maybe practicing anti-spiritual principles, whatever the case may be, that's where the challenge comes, and that's a challenge I like to take. So I just want to encourage everybody to do that. Um, in the end, I just want to say one last thing, and that is to think simply, because the right answer is always simple. This is a simple program. So thank you all for letting me come tonight. I appreciate having the opportunity. Thank you, Mike, and thank you guys for your attention.